A married lady goes to her doctor for her annual checkup, and everything is good. In her conversation, at the end of all the tests and examinations with the doctor, she expressed a concern about her husband. As you know, I raise champion golden retrievers, and one evening I was making their food. I had a big pot on the stove simmering, and my husband came home and got big a ladleful and ate it. I told him it was for the dogs, but he said it was delicious, and insisted that is what he wanted for dinner that night. Well, I make the dogs food every week, and every time I make a new batch, my husband eats it for dinner. I'm concerned about him eating the dog's food. The doctor proceeded to ask her what was in the dog's food and how it was prepared. After she describes in detail the ingredients and the preparation, the doctor final says, "I don't think there is anything that can hurt him. I wouldn't encourage him to eat it, but it sounds safe enough to eat." A year goes by, and the woman goes back to the doctor for her annual checkup. As was standard procedure, the doctor sits down with the woman and discusses the test results. As he is going through her file, he sees a note from the previous year regarding her husband's propensity to eat the dog food made by her. He asks her, "So is your husband still eating the dog food you prepare?" "Oh, no, doctor, my husband died." "Oh, my lord, I'm so sorry. It wasn't because of the dog food, was it?" "Well, not directly, no." "Not directly? What happened?" "Well," the lady said in a very sad and grief-stricken voice, "he got hit by a car when he was sitting in the middle of the road f***ing his balls." A young girl who was writing a paper for school came to her father and asked, "Dad, what is the difference between anger and exasperation?" The father replied, "It is mostly a matter of degree. Let me show you what I mean." With that, the father went to the telephone and dialed a number at random. As a man answered the phone, he said, "Hello, is Melvin there?" The man answered, "There is no one living here named Melvin." "Why don't you learn to look up numbers before you dial them?" "See," said the father to his daughter, "that man was not a bit happy with our call. He was probably very busy with something, and we annoyed him. Now watch this." The father dialed the same number again. "Hello, is Melvin there?" asked the father. "Now look here," came the heated reply. "You just called this number, and I told you that there is no Melvin here." "You've got a lot of nerve calling again." The receiver was then slammed down hard. The father turned to his daughter and said, "You see, that was anger. Now I'll show you what exasperation means." He dialed the same number again, and a violent voice roared, "Hello!" The father then calmly said, "Hello, this is Melvin. Have there been any calls for me?" An average Joe has entered a contest and won the first prize, a cruise in the tropical seas aboard a luxury ship. On board, there is also Scarlett Johansson doing advertisement work for the cruise line. Out of nowhere, a freak wave capsizes the ship. Joe and Scarlett somehow survive, hanging to a beach chair, and are adrift for a few days until they reach a small, uncharted island. Joe manages to build a hut and a pair of hammocks, and they live off fish and coconuts for a few weeks, until one evening, while they stare at the evening sky, they start expressing their fears aloud. Will they survive? Will they ever be rescued? Emotions flow freely, and before they know what they are doing, Joe and Scarlett are making passionate love to each other. A new routine begins, of catching fish, gathering coconuts, and making passionate love under the evening sky. After months of this new routine, one evening while they sit around the fire, Joe blurts out, embarrassed, "Can I ask you a favor, Scarlett?" She says, "Of course you can. If it wasn't for you, I would not be alive today. All you need to do is ask." "Well, it sounds ridiculous, but would you wear this?" and Joe produces a pair of mustaches made of coconut fiber. Scarlett agrees to put them on with the aid of some tree sap. Joe is overjoyed, but there is still something else. I have to ask for another favor. A small one, this time. Of course, Joe. I owe you my life. All you need to do is ask. Can I call you Brian? The request is strange, but Scarlett agrees. Joe gives her a massive whack on the shoulder and bellows. Brian, old pal, can you believe this one? I've been shagging Scarlett Johnson since 6 months. Dave and Jim were a couple of drinking buddies who worked as aircraft mechanics in Melbourne, Australia. One day, the airport was fogged in and they were stuck in the hangar with nothing to do. Dave said, man, I wish we had something to drink. Jim says, me too. You know, I've heard you can drink jet fuel and get a buzz. You want to try it? So they pour themselves a couple of glasses of high-octane booze and get completely smashed. The next morning, Dave wakes up and is surprised at how good he feels. In fact, he feels great. No hangover, no bad side effects, nothing. Then the phone rings. It's Jim. Jim says, hey, how do you feel this morning? Dave says, I feel great. How about you? Jim says, I feel great too. You don't have a hangover. Dave says, no, that jet fuel is great stuff and no hangover, nothing. We ought to do this more often. Yeah, well, there's just one thing. What's that? Have you farted yet? No. Well, don't, 'cause I'm in New Zealand. A man caught a goldfish, and as always, let me go, and I will grant you a wish, said the goldfish. But I don't need anything. I have a house, a summer house by the sea, cars, a cottage in the mountains, a yacht, more than enough money. I only fish for pleasure, he says. Come on, please let me go. I'll fulfill any wish. Well, okay, says the guy. From now on, I wish that my dear wife and I always have an orgasm together, and releases the fish. Voila, granted, says the little fish. The man picked up his fishing equipment, put it in the car, and happily drove home. On the way home, he came twice. A man goes to a Kebab street food restaurant. One classic portion with extra sauce, please. The man in the window writes down the order and yells to the back, 1-0 with a guitar. What? That's not what I ordered, replies the confused customer. Oh, don't worry. It's just our slang for your order, sir. Oh, okay. After a while, the order is ready and the customer immediately takes a bite. As soon as he bites down on his kebab, all of the sauce comes flying out the other end all over his shirt. Holding his kebab high up in his right hand, he uses his left hand to try and wipe at least a little bit of the sauce off his shirt and shouts, "Oh, f***." A woman grants her mother's unusual dying wish. She specifically requested pictures of her right foot be sent to an address in Rhode Island. A couple of days later, she realizes that reversed pictures of her mother's left foot were sent instead. Unsure of the importance, but determined to fulfill her wishes, the woman travels to Rhode Island to inform the facility of the mistake. After a long, arduous search, she finds an unmarked building in the middle of a thick forest. She rings the doorbell, and after a moment, a pleasant-looking man answers. Hello. I'm sorry to bother you, but my recently deceased mother donated. Oh, so you're Mary's daughter? The man says, blocking the door slightly. Yes, she was a magnificent woman. Yeah, well, in her dying wishes, it was noted that you requested photos of her right foot, she says, pulling out a photo packet. These are the correct pictures. We sent you reversed photos of her left. Oh, excellent, the man says, carefully taking the pictures. Thank you so much. She was a long-time dear friend of the Academy. and we are so grateful to honor her memory." The woman puts her hand up. "What's that sound?" Before he can stop her, the woman pushes past him and rushes into an adjacent room. There, projected on the wall, is a reversed picture of her mother's left foot and a room full of people masked. Enraged, she storms back to find the man sitting in the living room, waiting for her. "What is going on in there?" "Look," he says, "I think we got off on the wrong foot here." An engineer, physicist, and mathematician have been imprisoned. At some point, the warden realizes that the three men haven't been fed in a while. He accompanies an officer to check up on them. The warden and officer arrive at the first cell that contained the engineer. To their astonishment, the cell was empty and the wall had a hole in it. "How is that possible?" said the officer. "That wall was solid concrete." The warden quietly inspected the cell. After a few minutes, he exited and said, "He seems to have built a pick out of the eating utensils we gave him and used it to make the hole." The warden and officer continued to the next cell that contained the physicist. However, he too was gone, and once again there was a hole in the wall. And of course the warden inspected the cell and returned after a few minutes. The warden declared, "According to the papers on his bed, he very carefully calculated the weakest point on the wall and repeatedly hit it with a rock until it broke open." Finally, they arrived at the last cell that contained the mathematician. Unfortunately, he lay dead on the cell floor from starvation. The officer sighed. "After the other two, I would have expected he would have also escaped. He also has some papers on his bed." The warden entered the cell and picked up the papers. Then he shook his head and chuckled. "It appears," the warden said, "that he spent several days writing a very detailed proof that it was possible to break the wall." A group of passengers are riding the bus to work. Suddenly, the engine splutters and the bus grinds to a halt at the side of the road. The driver gets out, opens the engine compartment, and peers inside, cursing and swearing. After a while, the passengers get restless. A woman pulls a small toolkit out of her purse, gets up and goes outside, and sees the driver frantically trying to reattach a loose electrical cable with his fingers. "Would you like a screwdriver?" she asks. "I'd love one," he replies, "but we're 10 minutes late already." A pastor was addressing his congregation about marriage and staying together. He asked his flock, "How many couples have been married for 1 year?" A bunch of hands rose. "How many couples have been married 5 years?" Still a lot of hands rose. "How many 10-year couples do we have?" Less hands started to go up. "What about 25 years?" Only a few hands rose at this point. "What about 50 years?" Only one couple raised their hands. "Wow, 50 years. You younger couples should take advice from them. True dedication to their relationship to last that long." After the sermon, a younger couple came up to the older couple and said, "We've only been married for a couple years and it's been kind of rocky lately. Do you have any advice for us on how to stay together?" The old man looked at his wife and then back at the younger couple. "Well, we always had relationship problems throughout our marriage, and at one point I told my wife that if we make it to 25 years, I'll take her to Hawaii to celebrate." "Wow, that's really special. What did you promise her if you made it to 50 years?" asked the younger man. "That she could come home?" A mathematician, an engineer, a stockbroker, and a gambler were standing outside a casino talking. Suddenly, the gambler walks in and comes out broke a few minutes later. "I just didn't have any luck." "That's not how you do it," the stockbroker remarks. "Let me show you how it's done." The stockbroker walks in and walks out later carrying half as much money. "You need to manage your risks," he said to the others. The engineer scoffed at the results. "Let me show you how it's done." The engineer walks in through the front door and immediately walks out. He lets the other guys know that the only winning move is to not play. Finally, the mathematician speaks up. No, 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 that is not how you do it. Let me show you how it's done. Like always, the mathematician walks in and walks out an hour later, carrying a huge sack of money. How did you do that? The engineer asks, shocked, to which the mathematician replied, just go to the roulette table and bet 1,000 on every square. A young boy notices a beautiful girl across the street and strikes up a conversation. Excited, he rushes home and tells his dad, I met this amazing girl named Emma. His dad winces and says, sorry, son, Emma's your sister. I had a fling with the neighbor. Devastated, the boy cuts off contact. A month later, he meets Sophie and tells his dad. Again, the dad winces. Sophie's your sister, too. Furious, the boy storms out. Months later, he meets Brooke. Hesitant, he asked his dad if she's his sister as well. His dad winces again. Heartbroken, the boy tells his mom, who bursts into laughter. Confused, he asks why. She smiles and says, honey, don't worry. He's not your real father.